Prepare yourself for a journey into one of the most controversial and dangerous texts in human history. A text that has not only influenced the Bible but also challenged the foundations of religion, politics, and power for centuries. What if I told you that there exists a book so feared that entire institutions tried to bury its existence? Welcome to a story that few dare to speak about, the Septuagint, an ancient manuscript with the potential to upend everything you thought you knew about faith, tradition, and the Western world itself. Why was this book viewed as so dangerous? What secrets does it hold that made it a target of both religious and political authorities? And how could it possibly change the way you understand the Bible? Buckle up, because what we're about to uncover could very well reshape your entire perspective. The Septuagint is not just a relic of history, it's a text that still sends shockwaves through religious and political spheres today. Now let's dive into the depths of this ancient enigma. The Septuagint, the most dangerous book in the world. The Septuagint, also known as the Greek Old Testament or the translation of the 70, often abbreviated as LXX, is the oldest translation of the Hebrew Bible, originally written in Hebrew into Greek. But where does this name come from, and why is it so important? According to the letter of Aristeas, a historical text, the translation was commissioned by Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who ruled Egypt from 205 to 247 BC. He is said to have ordered the laws of the Jews to be translated into Greek by 72 Hebrew scholars, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. This is the origin of the name Septuagint, which refers to the 70 translators involved in the process. Biblical scholars agree that the first 5 books, the Torah, were translated around the early 3rd century BC, probably in the city of Alexandria, which housed a large Jewish community. The other books of the Hebrew Bible were translated throughout the 2nd century BC. Interestingly, during this same period, translations into Aramaic, known as Targums, also emerged, adapting the scriptures for the local language. During the Second Temple period, few people could still speak or read Hebrew. Koine Greek and Aramaic were the predominant languages among the Jews, which is precisely why the Septuagint became so relevant. It addressed an urgent need in the Jewish community of that time, allowing access to the scriptures in a language that most people could understand. The name Septuagint has an interesting origin. It comes from the Latin phrase Vetus Testamentum ex versione Septuaginta interpretum, which means the Old Testament from the version of the 70 translators. This expression, in turn, derives from the ancient Greek term, which also translates to the translation of the 70. However, it wasn't until around the 4th century, during the time of Augustine of Hippo, 354 to 430 AD, that the term Septuagint began to be widely used to refer to the Greek translation of the Jewish scriptures. Since then, the abbreviation LXX, representing the Roman numeral for 70, has become the most common way to refer to this historical text. According to Jewish tradition, the Septuagint's origin is surrounded by fascinating legends. The story goes that the Greek pharaoh of Egypt, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, sent 72 Hebrew translators, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, from Jerusalem to Alexandria. The goal: to translate the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures, from Hebrew into Koine Greek, with the intention of including this translation in the famous Library of Alexandria. This narrative appears in a text called the Letter of Aristeas, which was written as a correspondence between Aristeas and his brother Philocrates. Additionally, the story is recounted by significant figures such as Philo of Alexandria, Flavius Josephus in his Antiquities of the Jews, and even Augustine of Hippo. The legend is also recorded in the Babylonian Talmud, in the tractate Megillah, where it is narrated that King Ptolemy gathered 72 elders into 72 separate chambers without revealing to them the purpose of the gathering. He then entered each room and asked them to write the Torah of Moses, their teacher. According to tradition, God inspired each of them to produce an identical translation with no errors or discrepancies. Philo of Alexandria also reports that the 72 translators were chosen based on 6 scholars from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. However, this detail raises some historical questions, as it implies that the 12 tribes still existed during Ptolemy's reign. In reality, the 10 lost tribes had already been dispersed by the Assyrians nearly 500 years earlier. Nonetheless, a remnant of these tribes remained, taking refuge in Jerusalem, which significantly increased the city's population at that time. Interestingly, later rabbinic tradition viewed the translation of the Septuagint with considerable suspicion. Many rabbis believed that the Greek translation distorted the sacred text, making it unsuitable for use in synagogues. Too, it is thought that the Septuagint was presented to Ptolemy 2 days before the annual fast of the 10th of Tevet, a significant date in the Jewish calendar. Aristobulus of Alexandria, a Jewish philosopher, suggested that parts of Jewish law had already been translated into Greek long before the Septuagint came into existence. He even claimed that philosophers like Plato and Pythagoras might have drawn inspiration from Jewish teaching. Later, in 1844, Lancelot Charles Lee Brenton, a translator, recognized that the Jews of Alexandria were likely the authors of the Septuagint. However, he dismissed the account of Aristeas as pious fiction, arguing instead that the name Septuagint originated because the original version was submitted to the Jewish Sanhedrin in Alexandria for approval and editing. Septuagint became so important to the Jews of Alexandria that they celebrated its translation with an annual festival on the island of Pharos, the location of the famous lighthouse of Alexandria, which is also the legendary site where this historic translation was said to have been completed. Written in Koine Greek, the Septuagint contained many sections with Semitic influences, particularly idiomatic expressions and phrases derived from Hebrew and Aramaic. However, some books like Daniel and Proverbs displayed a much stronger Greek influence. The Septuagint also provides valuable insight into the pronunciation of Pre-Masoretic Hebrew, as many proper names were transcribed using Greek vowels. It is important to note that Hebrew texts of the time did not include vowel markings, and even with this translation, it is unlikely that all the sounds of biblical Hebrew had exact Greek counterparts. The Septuagint, unlike popular belief, is not a unified text. Instead, it is a collection of ancient translations of the Jewish Tanakh, the sacred scriptures of Judaism, as well as other Jewish texts that we now refer to as the Apocrypha. This collection was developed during a time when the canon of the Hebrew Bible was still evolving, and the translations were made by various individuals in different places and times, often using distinct Hebrew manuscripts. The Hebrew Bible, or the Tanakh, is divided into 3 sections: Torah, Law, Nevi'im, Prophets, and Ketuvim, writings. In contrast, the Septuagint is organized into 4 categories: law, history, poetry, and prophets, with the apocryphal books interwoven where deemed appropriate. Interestingly, the remaining copies of the Septuagint, which date back to the 4th century CE, contain books and editions not found in the Jewish canon, and the content of these copies is not standardized. Some scholars argue that there is no conclusive evidence to suggest that the original Septuagint included these additional books, which are known as deuterocanonical, or in Greek, anagignoskemena second canon. These texts which were written between 200 BCE and 50 CE, include works such as 1 and 2 Maccabees Tobit, Judith, Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, Ecclesiasticus, Baruch, including the letter of Jeremiah, and additions to Esther and Daniel. Moreover, some versions of the Septuagint are longer than the corresponding texts in the Masoretic Hebrew version, which is affirmed as canonical by Rabbinic Judaism. For example, the book of Jeremiah in the Septuagint is significantly shorter than its counterpart in the Hebrew Bible. In addition to the aforementioned books, some copies of the Septuagint contain other texts, such as the Psalms of Solomon, 1 Esdras, 3 and 4 Maccabees, the Prayer of Manasseh, the Book of Odes, and Psalm 151. The Septuagint was rejected as scripture by Rabbinic Judaism for several reasons. One of the key reasons is that in many cases it differs significantly from the original Hebrew texts. For example, the differences are particularly striking in the book of Job. Another important point is the quality of the translations, which often seem to lack an understanding of Hebrew idiomatic expressions. A well-known example of this is in Isaiah 7:14, where the Hebrew word Alma, meaning young woman, was translated into Greek as parthenos, meaning virgin. So this translation had significant implications for later Christian theology. The Septuagint became synonymous with the Greek Old Testament, which is the Christian canon that includes both the Hebrew Bible and additional texts. Today, most Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches accept these books as part of their sacred canons, while Protestant churches, following the Reformation, chose to adhere to the Jewish canon and exclude these texts. These additional books came to be known as the Apocrypha, and in some editions, such as the King James Version of the Bible, they are included under a separate title. As a translation from Hebrew to Greek, the Septuagint was shaped by Greek culture and linguistic nuances, which influenced the outcome of the translation. Some Hebrew terms had specific meanings that were not fully preserved or accurately translated into Greek, resulting in different interpretations. Furthermore, the cultural differences between the Jewish and Greek worlds also impacted certain translations, with some more abstract ideas from Judaism potentially being softened or adjusted in the Greek version. In Judaism, the Masoretic text gradually became accepted as the official canonical version of the Hebrew scriptures, while the Septuagint was considered of lesser authority. In contrast, Christianity, especially during the early Christian era, widely used the Septuagint, particularly among Greek-speaking Christian communities. The difference in the perception of the Septuagint's authority between Jews and Christians is a major point of controversy, as the Greek version presents significant divergences from the Hebrew tradition. In conclusion, the Septuagint's legacy is one of both profound influence and ongoing controversy. As a pivotal translation, it offers not only a glimpse into the religious and linguistic bridge between Jewish and Greek cultures, but also reveals how translation itself can shape religious understanding. The Septuagint's differences from the Hebrew Bible, its inclusion of additional books, and its acceptance within early Christian communities underline its vital in the development of both Christian and Jewish theology. Yet these very differences have also sparked significant debates that continue to this day, especially around the interpretation of messianic prophecies and the nature of Scripture. The Septuagint reminds us that translations carry immense power, capable of not only translating words but transforming ideas and worldviews. Through it, we see how different cultures influence the interpretation of sacred texts, how meanings can shift, and how these shifts can have lasting effects on theology and doctrine. If you found this discussion of the Septuagint insightful, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of religious texts, history, and theology. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What are your opinions on the role of the Septuagint in shaping religious history? We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. God bless.